And so basically, let's kind of bore into a little bit about what it is that the jury wanted to hear and what it is that was said. So one piece of testimony they're hearing this morning is what Pecker said about the Trump Tower meeting. Here's some of what he said on the stand. Quote, there was a discussion about that I was going to be the eyes and ears of the campaign. There was a discussion that I would be notifying Michael Cohen of any women that were in the process of or going to be selling stories. And I would notify Cohen that they would be available and that they would either have to buy them or take them off the market or kill them in some manner. So, again, very specific issues.
Very specific issues. And keep in mind, let's look at what the charges, right? We have falsification of business records for the purpose to cover up another crime.
34 times.
Correct. And here's the predicate crime. 17-152 New York election law. It is a misdemeanor to conspire to prevent or promote an election through unlawful means. So here, what we're seeing, the testimony that's being read back, this relates to that idea of the conspiracy. They're agreeing to suppress these stories. And this is where the prosecution, where there might have been some areas where Donald Trump is not so close to the transaction. Let's think about it. The invoices Michael Cohen sends. He testified he generated those himself. Donald Trump does not sign all the checks. So there's these areas where Donald Trump isn't necessarily very close to the transaction. But if you develop this conspiracy theory and they're all acting in concert, every single act in furtherance of that conspiracy can be impugned upon Donald Trump, which is what the prosecution is looking to do.
Interesting, because right now they're asking, this is what is being read back to them, part of the redirect of David Pecker by Steinglass, and it's specifically the transcript portion about catch and kill and about Pecker's understanding of his role in all of this, and that he wanted nothing to do with the Stormy Daniels deal. Catch and kill is something that we heard a lot about, not illegal, but in this particular case, if that meeting had as a purpose to create a plan to, in a way, do anything and everything so that these bad stories would not come out, coincidentally, when there was an election coming up.
Yeah, well, I think if it's the prosecutors, not a coincidence, obviously, right? But I think, yeah, that's the core of the prosecution's case, right? The catch or kill may not be illegal, all right, but what they're doing here is they're doing it for an unlawful purpose, and that unlawful, they're trying to impact an election for an unlawful purpose. And Jeremy, I agree fully with, reading the tea leaves here is difficult. When I would wait and read a jury note, as a prosecutor, if I could make money reading the future, you would try everything you can. But I'm feeling pretty bullish, again, if I'm the prosecution here, because they're going to David Pecker. And I've always thought David Pecker was such a strong witness to begin on. I mean, he came in there. He had no credibility issues. He still thought Donald Trump was a mentor and someone he still liked and looked favorably. And he came in and presented this whole narrative arc the way we expected Michael Cohen to do later in the trial. But he did that as the first witness and really went unchallenged. For them to be going to his testimony, that sounds to me like they're doing exactly what the prosecution wants, which is corroboration. That they've had Michael Cohen's story, and now they're saying we want to go back in, look through other testimony, and check off where we have corroboration. And David Pecker is a very strong witness for that point.
Oh, again,
I feel like a bobblehead. I'm agreeing with everything you're saying. It's absolutely right. Well, you just said it perfectly. I don't need to say it, although I'm here, so I will. But it absolutely is about the corroboration. And to my point before, if it was about Michael Cohen, they would have wanted more about Michael Cohen. And what they do want about Michael Cohen in terms of readback is directly related to Pecker's testimony. And Pecker sets the stage. He gets that conspiracy in motion. He shares that common goal and understands that while Donald Trump may have not signed everything or Donald Trump may not have created the invoice, it was that common scheme and plan, that common goal that they all shared together, and they did different pieces to make this happen for this catch and kill that in and of itself was not illegal. That's fine. Let's have no misgivings. Governor Cuomo did it. I'm part of Cuomo. I apologize. Governor Schwarzenegger did it allegedly back a long time ago.
NDAs aren't illegal.
Yeah, 100%. It's just the mechanism and how they did it and the manner they actually.
And so here's a question, because again, tea leaf reading, I'm like the worst. I don't even know what a tea leaf looks like. But the fact that the jury kind of got together as a group for the first time yesterday, right? I mean, they were able to sit and assume their responsibilities for about 4 hours and 20 minutes. Does that tell you anything, that this is what could be the first four questions of a whole slew of questions. If they're looking at this chronologically, that would be, oh, that's why they're asking about Pecker. He was the first witness. Is it possible that they're just breaking this down brick by brick to something that you kind of alluded to this week,
right,
that a lot of this is brick by brick to build the wall? Is this possibly just first phase? Let's ask the questions and then go forward chronologically down the case.
Yes, first of all, I drink coffee, not tea. So, you know,
We're
tea leaf. But I do think that that's also a possibility. So there's a lot of different reasons why the jurors could start here. One could be, as you said, Pecker's testimony was at the very beginning of the trial. Maybe they didn't remember it. There was a lot of, in the closing arguments by the prosecution, you got to look back to Pecker's testimony because it corroborates Michael Cohen. It could be because there's somebody in there who says, I don't believe a word Michael Cohen said. And there's other jurors who said, you know what? It was corroborated by Pecker. Let's go take a look at Pecker's testimony. So there's a whole slew of reasons why this could be happening. But I do think the meeting itself, that is the first step chronologically. And it really speaks to that idea of conspiracy. But we could absolutely hear more questions because keep in mind, we have documents, 34 different business records that serve as the very basis to this case. And this meeting and the testimony we're hearing about, this really relates to that predicate crime, that election law conspiracy, more so than the falsification of the records themselves.
I'm going to keep on going back. I'm going to cash in $1 on one of my tea leaf comments. I think when you consider what they're reading back in terms of the testimony, and you couple that with the read back of the jury instruction for the elements of falsifying business records, which is they wanted as well for charge number 1, which is the same thing as charge 2, 10, and 34. To me, if I'm guessing a little bit, they now are considering the elements of the crime pretty early. So they're moving through the facts, if you will, the evidence, and they're getting to the elements of the crime.
They ask specific questions.
Yeah, so again, it seems favorable to the prosecution because if you corroborate, and we have this evidence and this testimony out here now, and we're looking at the actual charges, that's a quick move. That's a quick move. I wouldn't be getting to the charges until I was satisfied, in all likelihood, with what the evidence was or was not.